Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first this week to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, everybody. I'm Spartan Grown. Well, thanks, Jack. Not everybody. Thank you, Jack. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown. Otherwise, you can get a hold of me through email at spartangrown@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to help you with all your cannabis growing needs.
Happy to have you back. Next up, we've got Dr. MJ.
Hey guys, it's Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. I am sorry for my absence. I guess it's been 2 weeks in a row. I was out of town setting up a new grow last week, which was a lot of fun actually. So I am back and kind of scrambling to try to catch up with everything, but I wanted to make sure to come and spend a couple hours with you guys here today. So I'm looking forward to the show.
Happy to have you back. And next up, we've got the American One.
Hello, Jack panel, everyone in chat. I am the American One on YouTube and the American One underscore with underscore Keens on the IG. And I believe now that Daga has got the beans back on up listed on the site. So if you guys are interested in Amy Aces, you could easily type in amyaces.com and it'll take you to that page. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Great to have you back. On time this week. Thank you. It's always good to see you right at the start of the show. I know sometimes it's tough to get here on time. I think we might have a few other panelists jump in, but you never know. It might just be the four of us this evening. But I didn't send any science out, as I mentioned that I might. I haven't still come across anything too groundbreaking or super interesting. I'm still looking. So if you guys do find science, send it my way, and maybe you'll get to see us review it on the show. But I do have some topics. If you guys are interested, maybe we can get a little bit of gauge from the chat interest and then the panel interest. But I was thinking maybe we could talk about some breeders that we like. We could talk about cultivation methods, like the different types. Training methods is another good one. Technology, different technology, anything that's changed. I know it's a new year. Is there any new tech in your grow? And then I think that we'll just go with those to start. So I'm curious if any of those topics are something that stand out to you as something you might want to talk about.
I just want to shout out to Seed Person One in chat. He said I look like a model. Thank you, man. That's the first time anyone's ever said I look like a model.
Speaking of Seed Person One, did you see harvested your
Velvet Punch?
Velvet Punch, yes. That looks beautiful, dude.
It did look great. I just noticed, I think Kyle was trying to hop in, but maybe he joined with the wrong name, and maybe I didn't hit accept soon enough. So Kyle, if you're still out there, if you're listening, go ahead and
yeah. He did ask if you were doing the show. I put the link back in there, so hopefully you'll come.
I have no idea where I put my phone. That's where I've got. Oh, it's right in front of me. It's like when you're wearing your glasses on your head and you don't realize that they're on your head and you're looking all around for them. So maybe that just happens to me. But as far as those topics, I feel like one that we haven't touched on for a little while is training methods, and maybe just discussing different options and the stuff that we prefer to do, because it's been a little bit of a bit since we've actually discussed stuff like that, and I think that it's relevant for a lot of people out there. So Tao, let's start off with you. It looks like we've got Kyle joining under his non-driver's license name now, properly. So good to see you, Kyle. We'll go ahead and introduce you here in a second, actually. He's still joining for the people out there that are listening. But it looks like we officially have Kyle Breeder with us now in the Zoom. So Kyle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody, Kyle Breeder here. I've been a little bit absent due to some life stuff going on, but things seem to be getting a lot better. Yeah, if you're looking for feminized seeds, I do have a website. It's purebreeding.com. I am going to be releasing some new varieties probably in 2 weeks from now, which is pretty exciting. Some really some classic stuff. But yeah, pure_breeding on Instagram, Kyle Breeder on Facebook, and yeah, feel free to reach out. And I enjoy conversating and talking about stuff. So
good to see you again. Happy to have you back. And we were just discussing that I hadn't sent any science out to the group, I mentioned that we might go over some papers and then hadn't really found any good ones that struck my interest quite yet. So if you come across any, Kyle, let me know. But some of the ideas that I had for this evening, one of them that I kind of talked about was training methods. And I was going to go ahead and start off by passing it over to the American one and talk about maybe how you like to train your plants. And then some of the stuff that maybe you've tried in the past that maybe you didn't like.
Okay. Well, I don't like the Scrog. I'll start out right there because you can't move your plants. You got to pretty much they're locked in place and various other reasons. But I did do that once, so like I can say at least I know about it. Tried it. Yeah, it all depends on the plants. Like since I run a lot of new seeds, it's always the plants are always different. So, like for instance, when I did those 2 autos recently, I pulled down the branches and secured them to the pot and helped spread out the plant that way, and that's actually pretty effective. I really don't do the super cropping where you knuckle up the plant unless it's really a giant, ridiculously beast. Yeah. Other than that, I put stakes in when they're not overly tall but need support. I do that a lot now recently.
Do you
And
top down?
I do top. I top, and yeah, I guess that's a factor for sure. And like that's what happened with those autos. So, and basically from seed, I like to let them get at least 3 nodes, sometimes 4. Lop off the top one, and that leaves 3 or 4 nodes. And a lot of times that first bottom node, like I don't count that one. A lot of times the branch really won't be vigorous out of there sometimes. Yeah. So I want at least 2 to take cuts from if I'm thinking about continuing on, keeping that genetic. And if I do that, then I have 4 mains coming up, and then I could top them again if I want. But oftentimes I'll just have the 4 mains come up, and that's what I pretty much did with those autos. And then I pulled down the 4 so that it opened them up and the light could get to all of them, and it did actually pretty well. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. Sometimes I will even without a scrag, a couple times I like stretched line from corner to corner or something like that for support. But yeah, now I do the stakes. I get decent sized stakes to hold things in place. And
Do you
yeah,
use multiple per plant, like on the outside as like a outer support? Some people put them right next to the main stalk, like right up the center.
Yeah, depending on the plant type. Sometimes the plant only needs one, and the side branches will be able to hold up the rest of it. Sometimes you need them like all branches need a tie. So it all depends on the plant and the size and what I'm trying to fill up, and yeah, like that pretty much.
Well, very well answered, the American one. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I want to take a second to welcome in Matthew Gates.
Hey everyone, it's Matthew Gates, IPM specialist, plant health, and a pest supporter and helper. Do we have a topic today, Jack?
Yeah, so we're talking at first about plant training methods, and I was going to pass it next to Spartan Grown because the American one, we were talking about stuff that we're doing now and like, and then stuff that we've tried in the past that maybe we didn't like and why. And Tao, the first thing he said was, well, I didn't like the scrog because plants get stuck in there. But I think Spartan Grown has kind of a unique and different approach to it. And it's worked out for him. So I'm going to pass it to Spartan Grown and let him kind of describe how he's gone about making it more convenient to work with Trellis Net, but still have access to each individual plant.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I too like what Tao was saying. I hated the fact that I couldn't move my plants around when I wanted to work on them or whatever the reason when I was locked into a scrog net. So I made individual scrog nets, and I grow only 4 plants per 4x4 or 5x5 area anyway. So it's just a matter of making 4 PVC frames that I can stretch a scrog net over for each one of those 4 plants. And so I just made it out of PVC for the supports, and then use regular scrog net, or I can string rope, like jute or hemp or whatever. And that way and then I've grown planters that are in wheels, that they have wheels on them. So I can just move the whole thing around and the scrog net stays to that plant so that I'm able to move them around. But it works for me. I really like it. Makes it easy for me. Actually, I use the heights are all pretty much the same height on those. And I use that height. That's a specific height. That's pretty much half of where my plant needs to be. So I know that I just need to get my plants close to the scrog screen, and then I can flip it. And then I can use that screen to spread it out and support the plant enough to hold it where I won't need a second screen usually.
I like that method, and I'm glad that it works well for you. A little bit of that work up front, I think, with building those little PVC frames for each planter has paid off in the long run in allowing you to, especially as a perpetual grower, where you might have different time of plants, or even if you flip them all at the same time, sometimes you just have the one plant that's taller than the other one, and moving them out individually to de-leaf is really convenient. Having them on wheels where you can just spin them around 360. I think a lot of the times people have pest issues or molds and mildews, I should say more accurately, but even insects as well, is because that back corner of the tent or that spot, like where they just don't have access to, it doesn't get seen. And there's a lot of neglect that can happen when you're not able to visually inspect and maybe remove some dead leaves or stuff that could have leaf on top of leaf. So
yeah,
I think
I want to answer real quick a follow-up question they had in chat. Someone who was Monster Mash was asking, what's my best option for the string? They hate how the stuff they use frays when they cut it. I don't cut my scrog nets. If I use the string, I usually will use, if I use the plastic stuff, I'll cut it. It's just way easier. Because of the same reasons you're talking, when I'm using string, I don't cut it for that reason. So I'll just unhook one end and then just unwind it all the way across, and then I'll cut my plant down and pull it out of the frame. But that was a good question. I don't cut my scrog screen when it's made out of string. I just unweave it.
I'm going to go ahead and share a screen so people can get an idea of what Spartan's little setup looks like with the PVC. And it looks like maybe you used like twine or something in this one, but it gives you a little bit better understanding. It at the beginning of the post will pan out. It's super frosty. Cobra milk looking fire. This was a little while back, I think. I scrolled back, but you can see the PVC there with the screws where he's got the line tied in.
So just use a self-tapping screw, and those are really short. They're not very long. They just barely go in there, just enough to hold the string.
Doesn't have to be super long or crazy because, like you said, you're just kind of tapping into the PVC. But whenever this, I don't know how long this is, or if I could restart it from the beginning. But at the beginning, it'll pan out, and you'll be able to see the individual. There we go. You can see each plant has the little PVC frame around it. So, yeah, perfect. And next up, I'll pass it to Kyle Breeder and ask, or actually Spartan, have you tried any training methods that you didn't like?
That I didn't like. I'm not a big fan of really heavy, what do they call it? Super crop, like when you're really hard not topping, bending branches over and stuff like that. It's really easy to break them completely off. And I've done that. Well, that's my error. I didn't do it correctly and broke the whole damn branch off. But I don't like to do those really intensive bends like that unless I absolutely have to. I try to get on that issue before it gets to be that big of a problem. Now, the reason I'd have to bend one over like that is it stretched really tall and it's got too big, and I've got to get it down. So I had at least weeks of notice that was happening as it was growing, and I chose to ignore it. So it's still my fault on that. So it's not like that the training technique is wrong or in any way. I don't want to get that across. It's just that it doesn't work for me in my situation. It seemed like that hard bend over is more like oh shit, I fucked up and I'm trying to fix my fuck up.
Speaking of that, I want to add, I don't like that FML. Oh wait, FIM. I don't like the FIM technique. Trying that, I don't think that's for me anyway, but I know some people love that. So I just want to throw that out there.
They both have,
Admittedly, the FML technique isn't very useful for many people.
yep, it can be discouraging. But the FIM, you can get a lot of tops really quick, but I don't like the
But it
unevenness and
makes it-
unpredictability.
Yeah, thank you. That
Because they're not uniform. Like when you do a general topping, you get two very beautiful uniform shoots that come out of it, and you know exactly they're going to grow that way and that way, and you can kind of even train them to fill out the
Yeah.
space. But when you're fimming, they kind of start going all over the place. But some, like you said, some people do really love it. And next up, I'm going to pass it to Kyle Breeder and ask, what is your preferred training method, and is there any training methods you tried in the past that you didn't like?
Yeah, I'm kind of only, I mean, I guess if I was like cultivating for flower, I'd probably have a more directed regimen, but because I'm more or less just, breeding cannabis and making seeds, I'm more of like a freelancer. And basically a lot of the cuts that I have, or all of my cuts that I have, that I've had for quite a while now, they kind of just do their own thing, man. And I think maybe one or two of them towards the very end, I need to put a stake or two to kind of, obviously keep them from bending over or leaning all over the walls and stuff like that. But the varieties I choose or that I have are I'm pretty blessed, in general, in some way, because they just kind of they all just do their own thing, man. I don't train, I don't do anything. I mean, I'll top, but I don't top for more. Well, that's not true. I do top for more shoots because obviously it entails more seeds, more flower. But I typically am topping to control speed because it gives me a few more days for it to kind of focus on his lowers, and because I have like a blueberry Thai strain that just wants to get wicked tall. And the reason why I keep it, because it's like such a nuisance of a type, but it's like the most extreme blueberry terpenes I've ever. It's like wet. Like the stem is so greasy that it's like wet when you go to touch it. It like slides down. But so in regards to training, I don't really do much. Yeah, again, some topping for more shoots, stuff like that. But I kind of just let them do their own thing. Things that I've tried, I did do. So in the very beginning, I did LST, and I know it is kind of a nuisance, like Spartan said, to kind of be doing that because I have broken branches. But the turnout is like beautiful, man. I had a Pineapple Express Auto and some other ones I did that too, and it is. You're kind of down there doing it every day and keeping them down and tying them down. But the ending product is pretty nice. I had like just all huge main colas everywhere, and it looked like a chandelier. It was just pretty cool. But yeah, I don't think I could do scrog. I feel like that's really, I see beautiful pictures of people scrogging and it's very consistent. But I would probably have a hard time trying to. Because I'm always pulling things out and checking things and pruning things, and I just think it would be. I assume there's some downside to trying to scrog in some ways or another, but yeah, that's just what I do.
Is there one that you tried in the past that you didn't like,
Uh,
or was that like LST? You were kind of saying you just have to be a little bit too active and you can break the branches on accident.
Yeah, I'd say, I guess because I've super cropped. Super cropping can be a difficulty too, because some stems if the stems are, some varieties are like real hollow, so super cropping on those aren't a good idea. But I think they all have a purpose in some way or another. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say hardcore LST could be maybe problematic.
Yeah, it's definitely easy to break branches, and that can be a bummer when they don't recover, even if you try and tape them or do whatever. But I'm going to pass it next to Dr. MJ and ask the same question that I've asked everybody else. Do you have a preferred training method that you go to, and any ones that you've tried in the past that you didn't like?
Yeah, on my own plants, I usually mainline them, or at least manifold them, like top them a couple of times in a fairly regimented way, spread apical dominance, and try to create, usually 8 really even main branches to grow up. I've been thinking a lot about training. I mean, it depends on scale. Like usually I'm growing like, 1 plant in 4 square feet, like 4 plants in a 4x4, 2 plants in a 2x4. And I want them to sort of spread out. I want to spread the dominance around. I don't want to have just one big cola, and I don't want to have to keep take care of, I guess, so many different plants. Like it's not necessarily the most efficient way to grow because you're spending a fairly long time in veg and kind of training the plants that way. So, in like a commercial situation in terms of production, I'd go with smaller plants, shorter veg time. I was also thinking about training moms for perpetual cloning too. And that's really sort of a different thing, although topping the moms early and sort of trying to spread them out into a big wide plant, fairly similar to sort of the way I would grow my flowering plants at home. But I guess all of that sort of just goes to say, like, it depends on what your goals are, your limitations are, what's going to be sort of the best training method for you. If you want to turn a crop over as quickly as possible and sort of get as much as possible, then probably go with more plants than I grow in the same amount of space, and you'd be able to have a shorter veg time and fill up that space, do less training. But it's easier on a different level to only have 2 or 4 plants to take care of. So wherever you sort of fit into on those various things, I prefer what are often called high stress techniques, but they're lower risk. Like the low stress training, LST, which is just bending your plant over, I think, as a few of you have already said, is fairly high risk. Like you can break the branch right in half and do real damage to the plant. Whereas like topping is like higher stress on the plant, but it's lower risk. Like you're not gonna screw it up that badly, and you're not gonna accidentally break the plant because you're like literally cutting the plant off at the head. So I kind of prefer that. I like things that are repeatable and sort of they'll duplicate really well, not just sort of for myself, but also so I can help other people and sort of know what's going to happen with their plants. And that's one of the reasons I think I really like sort of the mainline or the manifold strategy for that. I think it was Tao said something about like, different stakes to hold out the plants. I definitely use stakes too. And I found that it's not so much about holding them up. In my case, at least, I'm trying to grow the plant out much wider than the pot is. So it's more about spreading the plant out. Some plants also need help sort of holding themselves up when they get heavy towards the end of the flower and they can't sort of support their own weight. But generally, if I'm growing like that 8 main plants, each main is trained out away from the center of the plant, and sort of held in that position. So a lot of that sort of the stakes or the training that I'm doing that is about sort of positioning and spreading the plant out. I hear people often talk about like tying their plants down when they're training, and sometimes down is sort of where the anchor point is, and that makes sense. But I think the goal generally should be, and there's obviously exceptions in like really short spaces or whatever, but generally I think the goal should be spreading the plant out, not tying the plant down. Again, sometimes that's the same thing.
I think in
that's what I was gonna say. That's why I do that. I pull when I have the
I wasn't even thinking about you saying that, because I think you were specifically right. You tie it down just because that's where the anchor point is. But some people, when they're doing main lines, though, will really like try to get the main branches growing like as low as possible, and they think like having a 90-degree angle from where like the main stalk comes up to the side branches is like really important or something, and they're all about kind of like tying it down. And that can be dangerous. They can actually sort of create splits. And
that's where you get the splits.
I just don't think that's necessary. Our goal is always to just go out. And I do think that that's what you're doing, though.
Yeah, but you're right that there is a danger of, and one must also be careful if they're really growing fast and you tie it down like that.
Yeah,
it'll grow like the next day so much that it'll be fine when you tie it down, but then the next day it'll be split apart because
it'll split itself right open. Yeah, plants can definitely,
so you must be careful.
If you top a plant and then tie down both of the branches to opposite sides of the pot, which I see a lot of people do when they're mainlining, A vigorously growing plant will absolutely rip itself in half. So be careful with that. I don't really think there's much need to tie the branches down early in the mainline training process. Later, after they've grown a bit, you can kind of start spreading them out. But I think that there's too much effort on sort of keeping those branches early low sometimes. And yeah, it rips plants apart.
I would tend to agree because I actually used to try to do like the exact mainline method that I saw replicated because I'm in a really small space and I wanted like at least 8 nice tops on a plant. And from seed, you can pretty reliably get that first topping and then start tying it down or directing it even just outward. But oftentimes it's depicted as being tied down, and sometimes even with this something as heavy as like a metal, like a metal wire that's like bent
Yeah.
and put into the soil. And with a vigorous plant, I have seen very often, not like once, twice, but like dozens of times where people's plants split right in the middle.
Yeah,
And
they rip themselves apart. It's like,
funny enough, coupled with another one that almost everybody here has said that they don't like, which is LST. When they're taking those 2 plants, you've topped it and now it kind of looks like a Y, and you're kind of pulling the tops of the Y apart. And then
Yeah.
it's like it can only go so far, like a person, I guess, with flexibility until it actually splits and causes damage to itself. Some of them can really take it. And I also have noticed, as the guy who I guess will throw my hat in the circle for, I'm an LST fan and I do like to LST. I just like to have hands on the plant. It gets me in the garden more often and makes me look at the plants a little bit more closely. And I've heard some old school hippie voodoo about topping, and some people really hate it. And I've tried a couple times just to go without topping a plant and see how to manage a plant with, because for me, a long time, topping was just the way. I was like, you're always going to top. And so learning to like LST, and I think more so just like I appreciate like the bonsai element of that. Even when I was doing mainlining back when, I think that it's more of like a challenge, I guess, or like a bonsai technique than a practical commercial type grow or even home grow, because you can get the main line as like a Y versus like a T, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like Doc was saying, it's not imperative that the plant is, unless you're in like a 2-foot tall grow cabinet, it doesn't necessarily need to be at 90 degrees to the soil from the
in fact, I
stalk.
think it's stronger as a Y than it is as a T. I think that's a good analogy, right? A Y is a stronger base, and it like later on we'll be able to grow bigger branches off of that. If you really tee it off too strong, I mean, it's great in a situation where you're trying to keep a plant in a 3-foot tall closet or something, right? But if you're trying to grow a big plant that way, I think it's much better to have a Y than a T.
You know,
And
when I was littler, I tried, at one point I put weights on my branches. Like I had this chain and I would put chain on it so it would bend down and, you know, away from the plant. But yeah, I know that's ridiculous.
there's
I
a
would say
company
that
that
would be
sells
the
little
worst.
plant weights and like low stress
That's
trainer
crazy.
bands. They have like these tiny
Yeah.
little like lead balls or whatever that they hang like on little hooks. And
Right.
I showed this a long time ago, and there's like
I
a whole
mean, it
bunch of
works, but yeah, it's not a feasible idea if you have many plants. And yeah, it's just, I don't think it's such a great idea. But
it's finding
to
a
each their own.
solution for a
Yep.
problem that doesn't necessarily need a solution, I guess. Like there's lots of other ways to go about it, and it doesn't necessarily even need to be done, because there's different ways of growing the plant that don't require that will still end up with lots of great bud and avoid. I think some of the reasons, like a lot of people really like the mainlining. There's a guy like Nug Buckets who made it pretty popular, I think, for a while. His method was pretty popular. But one thing that a lot of people liked was it made visually good looking buds. Like you had like 8 nice spears that were pretty easy to trim. And it very often prevented people from getting mold or mildew, because he recommended like a tomato cage. And essentially you'd have like 8 colas tied to a tomato cage all around the outside, and none of them were touching each other or on top of each other. And by doing that, growing away from the center of the plant, where the plant's tendency, as many of you may know, is just grow straight up. Like if you've seen a autoflower without being topped, it's got that apical bud right in the center, and then everything else kind of wants to be semi-snug unless you pull it away from that, and you can get molds and mildews and less airflow and things like that. So I think some of these training methods can, and I guess this is a good time to pass it over to Matthew. Do you have anything like from a home grow or even commercial perspective, like that would be your typically recommended thing, or do you make it more catered to, like, depending on the environment, if it's more humid or if it's drier and things like that. Like, how do you think about plant training when you are approaching from an IPM perspective?
To be honest, usually I am just working with the conditions that somebody else is growing in. I'm usually not recommending people to go a certain way or another, though I will say that, like Dr. Coco and other people, the I think main lining is my preferred choice for cultivation. Though I have experience with the Y growth. I kind of felt like it would be less strong than the mainland or mainland. I keep saying mainland occupational hazard, the main lining. But that was just for a moment because I was thinking we were just talking about things ripping apart, and so I could totally see if it sags or if it gets really heavy on both sides. Like I've seen it split in half, but that's not necessarily an indictment of its ability to be structurally sound. I guess I will also say that thinking about it a little bit more. No, I don't think that's actually very relevant. I think that's all I have for that. Usually it's not a massive effect on IPM, but if you have a lot more foliage, that can have an effect on coverage and things like that, I suppose. But that's probably going to happen regardless of what you're training with, unless you just cut off and defoliate all your leaves.
I was going to say that is often something I see recommended when people have an outbreak of pest, is to remove all the infected leaf or just a large amount of leaf so that you can better get like pesticide applications in there, and physically just remove a decent chunk of the population before going and applying maybe a predator or something like that.
Yeah, that can be helpful because you're maybe getting rid of some of the pests as well if you're targeting them, or you're just making the surface, there's just less surface area to get infected in the first place or to move around on it. But there can be there's a cost to that too.
If you notice that somebody was having like issues with like powdery mildew or botrytis, would you recommend maybe like topping more or deleafing or something like that to try and maybe provide more airflow or something like that, just to, because I don't know if that falls under IPM or general cultivation practices, and like where, if you're comfortable stepping in and like suggesting something like that, or if that's something you're going to leave to the cultivation people.
Generally, I wouldn't suggest those for or those techniques for like abating like powdery mildew or botrytis if they already have the problem. I feel like there's usually more significant factors, but creating a bunch of wounds can be problematic for its own sort of issues. So in some ways that would not be so great. But yeah, you're right. Generally speaking, whatever I recommend has to fit in to the set and setting of the cultivation. And usually a lot of times people they have their way of growing, and usually things like whether they decide to top and how they decide to top and how they decide to cut the plant and those horticultural techniques, they're usually not a massive impact on the pest pressure, or at the very least they're usually more proximate problems to deal with, if there are any at all to deal with.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that maybe the one exception there, Matthew, would be, if somebody was just growing little untopped plants with gigantic colas that were repeatedly getting botrytis, right? And you're just like, I could imagine a situation like that where I'd be like, all right, guys, we got to either, we got to change some aspect of cultivation so that we're not growing these giant buds that are always getting botrytis. We might be able to do that by changing some other aspect of the IPM protocol. We're changing the climate in the room, but I think I would probably bring up, training, topping, doing something different with the cultivation regime if that was an ongoing problem like that with botrytis.
Yeah, with the I was mostly thinking about like the leaf canopy and stripping leaves. I was on that that vein, but that's a really great point, and I feel like I say it a lot now recently, but yeah, those compact buds are really going to bite people in the butt, and I'm, perpetually sad about that because it's very aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, it's an issue to think about, and with different strains, and changing a protocol like that in a commercial facility could be really complicated. Just saying them, oh, you should chop these plants. Well, that might add a week or 2 weeks to the cycle rotation, and they might not be able to sort of easily fit that into their cultivation plan.
And that's if they're even aware of what those effects could be. But like you say, yeah, some people are really on it and they know, maybe because they've done it before, that effect is likely. But in a lot of cases, people are not even aware what the effects could be, and so understandably reticent for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch back a little on training methods, and one that a lot of people I think have had bad experiences with is super cropping, because oftentimes they break the plant or it doesn't leave that desired knuckle. And something I've noticed is if the plant is super dry, then it tends to not take to that training as well, or LST in general, because those are two that I use very often. Super cropping, I typically reserve for that top shoot that is dominating the rest of the pack, and it's way out above everybody else. So I'm trying to even it out and just make a little bit more even canopy. But when sometimes I'll just go through and super crop, or not super crop. There's not really a term for what I'm doing, I guess. It's more like LST, I guess, but like massaging it and not quite making a full pop and stem, just like loosening it up a little bit and
You
massaging.
soften the tissue at the place that it's going to bend.
Yeah, where it's not like a full crunch and it's not going to leave a
Right.
knuckle, but it makes it a little easier to just lay it over. And
But it bends right there where you softened it, as opposed to like in a real LST will just have an arc, right? The whole way, like the whole branch will just sort of arc over in that direction. Where I think a scrop or a super crop is when you soften it in one spot so that like the branch only really bends in that one spot.
And I'll do that to like the majority of my stuff. Like every little branch that as it is coming up, I'll kind of push them away from each other so that they're not just growing up like right side by side. I'll do one like
Yeah.
diagonally all different directions away from the center of the pot. And the main one I'll actually hit with like a hard kind of like heavier crunch and pull. But even then I'm like a little bit hesitant to go too hard, because breaking that top shoot is sad. So I probably am more on like the softer end still on that. So sometimes I'll have to go in like the very next day and it's right back up, 2 or 3 inches above everything again, which I'm actually fine with. It might get
Do you
PPF.
tie it down when you fold it over?
No, I don't tie anything at this point. Just kind of using.
Yeah, my plants are always like super cropping would be pointless if I didn't tie them down then, because they'll just stand back up the next day.
I like that though. It's like if you time it right, they fill out your space pretty well. And at a certain point, when they stop the stretch, you no longer have to do it, and they just kind of sit, and you've got these branches. The thing that I really like about super cropping, in my experience, is that bud always just looks so frosty. If you do get that nice fat knuckle, like when you successfully get it, in my experience, that has always been like one of the better buds, or at least better looking. And I don't know what it is, but it always, like, I've tried to dissect the knuckles, and it's never a hollow stem. That thing is always like rock solid. It's like one of the hardest parts of the stem. So something in that cell tissue breaking and then like rebuilding. It's something like, I think of it kind of like a bone. When a bone breaks, it actually rebuilds stronger. And maybe that might be kind of a similar process with what is happening in the plant. So it looks like we do have some questions though, from the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer these too. We did chat Q&A last week, and I'm going to get to a couple other topics after we answer these. So
Before we get off training, I want to shout out Hemp with Gigi, because so far he is like the I consider him one of the best persons to explain how to fill up that canopy with training and other methods. I really I'm impressed every time I see his canopy. It's always covering and spot on. So yeah, he has some good YouTube videos on explaining how he does his. So I'll throw that out.
shout out to Hemp with GG. There's a guy on Instagram also, the Northern Scrogger. I think he's a Canadian dude. He grows like 2 plants side by side, and I will say the one drawback of that is you have to veg a lot longer to do that style of grow. But for limited plant count people, to fill up the space that he does with the limited plants he does with beautiful, nice even canopies and tons of frosty top buds, it's pretty impressive. So cheers to them. Lots of great people in the community that deserve their flowers, literally and metaphorically. So I'm happy that they're growing them and keep on growing. But Flava Chesa 2926 says, at Spartan Grown, I'm going to try full organic soon. And there's so much information out there. I was looking into Build a Soil 3.0. Would you recommend or suggest another route for a newbie or to organic? So Spartan.
First of all, I wanted to bring this up on the show because I think it's a great question that a lot of people can benefit from. And organics can be organics is one of those things for me as a gardener that makes my gardening far easier than when I was in synthetics, in the regard of the watering tasks, I think mostly, but and fertigation and all that, but it's far harder on the information gathering and learning, and because once you go down that organic wormhole, I mean, you can get buried by information and just completely confused. So as a beginner, I would recommend, instead of trying to go out and build your own soil, to do exactly what who was the original question asker on this? I've already forgotten the name. It was Flavor Chase or Flava Chesa. Is exactly what you're suggesting. Get a pre-built soil, and yes, absolutely build a soil. What Jeremy's doing out there is he's doing great things, and he's even sending all of his inputs to be tested by a third party rather than just taking the manufacturer's word for it. So I think that's really great what he's doing over there for Build a Soil. So that Build a Soil 3.0, yes, I haven't used it myself though, so I can't like give you firsthand knowledge. But in the organic spirit of things, what you should be trying to source is an all-in-one soil like that you could walk into a store and buy. You know what I mean? The least amount of miles that you can put on that bag of soil, the better. So in my case, there's a soil blend here in Michigan that I can walk right into my local grocery store and pick a bag of that up and bring that home with me. And that's Build a Soil. All right, it's not Build a Soil, it's M3 mix, Michigan made mix. But I'm not sure what your location is, but there's probably a some kind of a grocery store near you that you could walk in and just grab a bag of soil, and it's gonna save you money on shipping. But yeah, Build a Soil, if that's your option, then that's your option. Go ahead and grab it. I'm not saying that's a bad option, that's a great option. But I would like you to source, if you can, more local if you can. I mean, if you're in Colorado, that's local, that's a local choice. But other than that, yeah, that's my recommendation. Get you a sip container. I prefer City Pickers. Earth Box is another popular one. I just think that the City Pickers are a better size that fits better in a 4x4. That will make the watering way easier on you, and that's what's usually a lot of people struggle with. All you have to do is fill water through the tube. I can tell you on a City Picker, it's a gallon. You can put a gallon. I think it holds almost 2 gallons. So when I look down the tube and I see it's empty, I put a gallon in. I know it's not going to overflow, and I know that it's going to be plenty enough water for that plant.
Well, and even if you did overflow it, they're built with I have one, I'm growing plumeria in, and I just take a hose and I spray it, because I'm not taking the plumeria as seriously as I do my cannabis. So I'll just take the hose, spray it in that hole until I see it start running off the side. There's like a little level it gets to, and once it hits that level, instead of going into the soil, it just drops out the side and then runs off. And so even if you make the mistake of giving too much water, it's not going to like waterlog your plant, which is kind of a brilliant solution.
Yeah, and that's, as a beginning organic grower, I think that would set you up in a pretty good spot to be successful.
Even experienced organic growers, I think, often are overwatering or underwatering and not realizing it, because it's so hard to time it just perfectly. And I think there's something about the system, whether it's a City Picker or Earth Box, of keeping that moisture in the soil where it's sealed all the way around and you're keeping the microbial life alive. The roots up top are a lot healthier than I've ever seen when I grew in pots. So I really like that system. I'll also shout out like Coast of Maine has like Stonington Blend. There's like Stepwell, Living Soil for like I think Canadians. There's so many good ones out there. So just talk to maybe your local growers. Brandon Rust, shout out to Bokashi Earthworks if you're in Oklahoma, or even if you're not, I think he does small bags in the mail for a home grower. So if you're trying to get started, he has a start to finish that he's gotten like lab tested and balanced for cannabis specifically. And gosh, there's so many good ones out there. I am drawing a little bit of a blank, but I follow a few really.
Yeah, I mean, I
great ones.
encourage if you have if you want to explore like a local, you can shoot me a message on Instagram, or Jack a message on Instagram, or shoot me an email, spartangrown@gmail.com, and you can ask questions back and forth, and I'm sure everyone on the panel will answer questions. So if you have more questions that are more specific like that, feel free to ask.
I got a bag of the M3 because I was curious. I was hearing really big claims from actually a guy in Massachusetts about his like grams per watt with a certain lighting system using that soil. And I was like, I got to try this stuff out. So I got myself a bag. And the second time I got it was actually in Arizona. I picked it up at a grow shop. They carried it out there, funny enough, on my way back from my in-laws. But I've been
They
recommending it.
distribute all over. They were down in Florida not too long ago.
Shout out to M3 Swan Swanson. He's got like a patent on that soil. He gets all of his stuff tested for heavy metals as well.
I've heard
And,
he's passed. So I don't know who's running it.
oh
now.
man,
He's
well,
passed away, yeah.
there's a lot of really good guys over there. Every time I called, I got taken really good care of by the people. They were friendly, had tons of information, and he's left a good legacy behind because a lot of people have grown a lot of dank in that soil. And the M3 mix is like what he marketed towards the like normal growers for like tomatoes or whatever vegetable plants. It works well for a lot of stuff. And then like in Michigan, the laws have the word marijuana and it's spelled like with an H. So his M3 mix, like you could also find it by typing in the medical marijuana with an H mix. So like M3 was Michigan made mix and it's also a medical marijuana mix. And so shout out to Swan for creating that. And I grew in it and I actually hit the claims, funny enough, after a long time trying it. The guy said he got like 2 grams per watt with Cobb LEDs and M3 soil. And I was like, okay, let's see eventually. And I actually found out it's better to not chase that grams per watt. I think grams per square foot per year, I think is the better way of going about things. But all that being said, I really love the M3 and shout out to Jeremy at Build a Soil because I use Spartan's reamendment recipe with that craft blend. It makes it pretty easy. I use that and then the big 6 micronutrients plus humic acid, water that in one time and then I'm water only the rest of the time. Maybe I'll give some amino N plus from Brandon Rust, Bokashi Earthworks, and then maybe some Bokashi or also Bokashi Earthworks. It's the micro plus, but otherwise I found that with organic, sometimes less is more. So when I was re-amending, I was going a little bit too heavy and I even started to like almost feel like I could taste some of the like organic inputs in my flour. And maybe it was just in my own mind, but when I cut it back, I wasn't having any less yield and the flavors I feel like were expressing a little bit better and the plants didn't necessarily suffer. So I definitely found out that you don't need to go super, super heavy handed with some of these amendments, especially if you're not in a giant pot. But we've also got question from Shrubs, who says, does using bacillus in foliar spray prevent botrytis and powdery mildew? I'll pass that to Matthew.
Can you say that again?
Does using bacillus in a foliar spray fight botrytis and powdery mildew?
There are bacillus products you can buy. There are bacillus species that do well against both of them. But I was just actually talking about Bacillus amyloquafaciens, which is really common to be used against botrytis and other bud rot pathogens. Really good research report that came out that showed when they applied, they actually applied several microbial parasites and competitors. 2 of them were fungi. I think one of them was a bacteria, and that was the bacillus. And
The one that you just said wasn't BT. What was the second word?
amyloquafaciens or K-fascians or queefasciens.
So is it BA or BK? What's the abbreviation for that bacillus? Or is there
BA. I don't actually encounter people saying like BA when they mean it, but I guess it would be BA. But so this bacillus product, there's a bunch of different strains out there, but when they basically applied it 48 hours in this research report. They applied it 48 hours before inoculating with botrytis and I think also sclerotinia. And those can both cause bud rot. And when they did that, like there was practically no colonization or no colonization. But that was, of course, a preventative application. And I think also the same Bacillus species, if I'm remembering right, is also great for powdery mildew as well. But there are also other microbes that you can use in addition to that.
I have anecdotal evidence that, at least for botrytis, it seemed to really make a difference. It wasn't just Bacillus subtilis. It was, I actually at the time was using Voodoo Juice from Advanced Nutrients and Tarantula from Advanced Nutrients. And during the end of flower, when it rained outdoors here outside, I would run out anytime it rained and I would spray it with those things, like probably before the rain even dried. And that seemed to definitely keep it at bay. I only had one very little spot on a lot of plants. But I saturated it and I made it a little bit stronger than recommended because the plants were wet already. So it seemed to help on me. So like that's anecdotal, but
and were you using it in reaction to it or preventatively?
Preventatively, yeah.
Yeah.
I started.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I want to hear the details because I was gonna say if it was in reaction and you had a really great efficacy, that's even better, right? Like,
yeah, no, that wasn't the case though. I knew what was coming, so
there you go.
Yeah, made it a practice that as soon as there was buds on it and it rained, I would make the trip and go out there and spray them, and it really seemed to work though. And those were multiple Bacillus. I just checked what they were. It was all multiple Bacillus species, and that Amlio, that one was in there too. So
yeah, and I use this example in my live stream today on Instagram where basically you're talking about the cost and the benefits of having a preventative plan. And it's like, even I took data from a California report, a survey, so there's biases associated with that, but basically, like, even if you conservatively expect just 1% of your crop, this was commercial, but and looking at the average prices, this was in 2017, it's just
right.
It's just no competition. There's just no reason not to have it. There was like it was like 4 times as expensive for just 1% of your crop being destroyed by like botrytis, but way less to prevent it with Bacillus or another product.
One of the Bacillus I hear common is BT or Bacillus thuringiensis. And what is that one most commonly used for?
That one's most commonly used for flies, mostly fly larvae. There are others too. You can use I think there is a strain of BT. Yeah, there are strains of BT for caterpillars right? As well. Yeah, but
BTK, right? Or
well, there's Kerstaki, there's Izawi. Those are 2 that are used against caterpillars.
Isn't there also like
BT
Israeli
Bacillus thuringiensis was the protein that was taken and genetically engineered into corn, soybeans, and wheat. I think BT corn, BT soybeans, that was taking that protein and sort of, or that DNA sequence, and getting those crops to express it for themselves. And that was all to fight off, I mean, primarily what I call caterpillars. Matthew may think of them as sort of more intricately named groups of organisms, but the crops that were, the pests that were really taking down the soybeans and the corn in particular.
A big one was, and those are those cry proteins. A big one was the diamondback moth, which is a huge problem for mustard crops. And I think I brought this up before in the live stream here for Cheap Home Grow, but basically it was rendered not useful like within a couple of years at least, perhaps earlier.
That's what I was gonna say. It very quickly became ineffective, right?
At least for the diamondback moth. For other ones, less so. But yeah.
Oh, right, in the corn,
you breed resistance for it.
Nature finds a way.
Yeah, they have to bring now they're being told. I think we talked about this last session. I think Dr. Coco, you might have. Yeah, like now they have to have swaths of plants that don't have that. If they're going to use
Yeah,
both,
refuge
'cause you need
areas.
to. Yeah.
You know, I don't like the BTI mode because the bad bugs have to eat it first before they die, correct?
They're all like, a lot of them are like that. Even the BT and the
That's the same with so a lot of things, right?
well, with
So
the amylocate fashions, it's a fungal, but yeah, like a lot of times there has to be a little bit of eating that happens. And if it's
And it
caterpillars,
has to be on the plant while they get there to eat it, and you have to keep reapplying it, right? It's not like it's persistent on the plant. You
isn't that
apply
the
it
same with
once and
Bavaria
it walks
bassiana
away.
though? Like every 4
Yeah,
days?
I think so. Yeah.
I would say
Well, maybe
I would say it's
once a
better if
week.
they eat it, but they don't have to with Bavaria or like Isaria, because they will penetrate the cuticle of the insect and just infect it that way. But yeah, like it is more effective when it's being consumed. In
But with
fact, that's
Bariata,
like
you have to reapply often though too. Still, but
Well, in thinking about it, if you do
actually a
have
lot of
it,
these
we were just
you
talking
do.
about preventative and how it's good to have it there ahead of time. So if
Yeah.
the plant is theoretically
go.
covered, you've got like a shield all around the plant. When the pest goes to bite into it, it's getting a nice healthy dose of whatever that preventative is,
It
as well
doesn't
as maybe a
last,
little
you're
bit of
right.
plant.
let me ask you, Matt, is there a problem with applying different and various? Like, are we going to spray the plant with every single? Like, if we do BT and then a different application, will they all be effective? Will one take over? Will they still be effective if applied together?
I don't know any like severe compatibility issues like you're talking about, and I think that's one reason why or at least in the it's one reason when it's a good product, it's a reputable product, that they apply so many at the same time. But some products out there try to like dazzle you with like, look, we got 100 different microbes, but like they might not
Right.
be relevant to what you're dealing with. um
Yeah.
and you are totally right with regards to like the prevention needs to be done constantly. Like in my example, when I did my live stream today, like I like gave an example of like a product is like $150 for 100 grams, and you need to apply like half of that per 10,000 square feet, let's say. And if like August through October is your bud rot season, which it is for a lot of people, and sometimes it's longer, then you'd have to apply like once per week. Let's assume that works. Then that's 12 weeks, or like $900 for prevention plus labor in a commercial setting, or your own labor, right? So that's like, and I estimated like an additional 900, it's like $1,800. But like when I use the average from this survey about how much the average price goes per pound in 2017, even if you lost 1%, you lost like almost 10 pounds. That's like $7,900. So
A lot of people will
it's
say the price has fallen a lot since 2017, just to be
a
devil's
lot,
advocate.
that's
because
what
a
devil's
lot of
advocate.
people
That's my whole point of
here
bringing it up.
know that the price has come down quite a bit since 2017. And so some of those calculations might need to be recalculated for some of the
They're not
modern
really
farmers.
necessary to be recalculated because it's just an example.
I understand. I'm just saying for those out there who are gonna whine in the comments that why didn't somebody say the pound price is way less now? It's like, all right, I said it for you guys, okay? But it is important. I think the point still stands. Whether it's 1%, 10%, however much of your crop are you willing to lose, and that's where your return comes from. You need to get a successful harvest, and one of the ways to get there is to be clean within your cultivation setting and use the right things at the right times. And so having someone like Matthew who knows when and why to apply is good for most cultivation settings. I think those that don't can get away with it for so long until they don't. And then the issues literally cost a lot of money and time and frustration. So it
I think though, to Tao's question though, it is important to at least try some combinations of things, because every good defense is to have multiple layers. And there's evidence. I was looking through my notes, I couldn't find it real quick, but I'm just going to fly from the top of my head here, so don't hold me to it. But there's evidence, and I believe it was the two were trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, I believe it was. Anyhow, with those two found in the soil, or the plants in that same soil had a higher resistance to powdery mildew than having just one of the two. So together they were stronger than either one by themselves in that resistance. So I think
Like
there's
their
a
own
lot to
entourage
it.
effect.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
exactly.
good point. Good point, Jack. Yeah, I think that's, and I think I talked about it. I like to call it like a little bio barrier or something. I think one time, a long time ago, Spartan, and perhaps I think you also, Jack, we were talking about what's our methodology for transferring cuttings, and like, do you dip, do you spray, and like, I think that microbial biopesticides, just as another example from that survey, apparently from the people that they surveyed, like the vast majority of them relied heavily on microbial products. And that's kind of endearing and exciting. And I think that's one thing that I'm enthused about in cannabis, because it's happening in other crops too, but there does seem to be a large vent of people who, for good reason, just want to use those products and have less potential negative side effects for other people's health, or just being cautious. And I applaud that.
It's always great to see more microbial use and people finding different ways and maybe cleaner ways if they don't have to use something harsher. I'm definitely always open-minded, because sometimes things don't work for everybody. And so we've got to make sure that people have options so that they can get to harvest as cleanly as possible and produce a good product. But Kyle Breeder did just have to jump out, so cheers to him. Pure_breeding. If you're looking for him, he said he had to go at 8. I meant to pass it over to him, but didn't do my hostly duties in time. I got lost in the conversation. But yeah, I think this is definitely a good conversation, but I feel like we could go into a little bit more. Sometimes we do these like discussions at the beginning where we're talking pretty heavy cultivation, and then the second half we talk a little bit about more lighthearted stuff. And one of the things that I had on just my general list, these are actually ideas that I had for Greenstock Talks a long time ago. that I just pulled up for general ideas that we could talk about. But one of them was like stoner tips, is kind of how I labeled it. But stoner has like a negative stereotype, but just like cannabis user tips for the general person. And if you have something that you feel like as a user of cannabis in your daily life that helps you, I know some people have to, like myself, fly under the radar, and maybe you're going places where people aren't cannabis friendly, and maybe you don't want to put it out there. Or maybe you're the type of person who's just like, I'm going to make everybody know that I'm using cannabis and not care. But just is there any like life products that you use regularly, like something as simple as, I know people used to for a long time carry like little Altoid stands for the joints and things like that. Something I'm thinking of is like, I know a lot of people that kind of give themselves away because their breath smells, and they think that like a piece of gum or something will cover up the smell of cannabis, or like a bong or a bowl. But oftentimes you chew that gum, that flavor goes away, and then you're just chewing on a piece of rubber, and your breath still kind of smells like resin. And the people out here, a lot of people know, we're familiar with cannabis. And if you're like myself who works with kids, it can be good to not have the smell of cannabis on you. And one piece of advice that I definitely have benefit from is using a cough drop versus using gum.
Oh, agreed.
Cough drops, not only does it open up your throat and make you not like cough as much so you can breathe well, but it also covers up the smell so much better. And I think that is definitely a simple thing. You can just get yourself a little pack of cough drops, and I think that there is some general benefits. Maybe they're terrible for you in the long run, but I don't know.
Could you put that Altoid tin up again?
That's a good idea, though, Jack, the cough drop.
I love how it's green, so the green screen works. That's so great. It was perfect.
I don't even actually have a green screen. It's Zoom trying to do Zoom's thing. And
oh wow, yeah, you're right. Of course.
My green bottle. Oh, it was doing It was showing up earlier. The light in the room is what it is. When the sun was coming in through the background, it could actually pick it up. But now it's not getting enough light. So just enough light to see me, I guess.
I used to keep my weed in the Altoid tin.
That's a lot of people. That's why I brought it up. But this is kind of an homage to that. Shout out to American Weed Co. It's a veteran-owned brand.
Ah, very cool.
They launched on Veterans Day this year, and I was lucky enough to be invited to a private show with Revolution and Modest Yahoo but they were giving these little tins out. They had like 7 joints in each, and
Nice.
it's actually pretty good bud. And I like supporting the veterans, and especially if they're gonna fucking full disclosure, invite me to a concert, private
Yeah,
show,
right.
give me tons of free weed. They had like a free weed bus. And a funny story, this dude just wandered up. He was like there on a business trip from Maryland, and he thought it was a food truck. So this dude Carlos walks into the bus, and like the security was pretty lax, I guess. So he walks in, and there's just like boxes full of these little tins full of 7 joints, and he just like sits down, and we start busting them open and handing him joints, and we start smoking with him. He's like, I came in here thinking it was like a food truck, and now I'm just getting handed a whole bunch of things. Like, are you at the concert? He's like, no, I'm here with like a business trip. So it was stoner tip number 2 from Jack. It would be sometimes seize the opportunity. Stoners are pretty open-minded and friendly. So if you see a friendly looking circle and you're trying to fucking get down on a sesh, maybe just wander up and strike a friendly conversation, and you might enter a fun circle.
Don't say anything that makes you glow though. No glowing comments.
Say on the down low, there was a chick that I was helping out with medicines, and she was like, I sold some Agent Orange. She's like, I want that Agent Orange. I'm like, why? She's like, because it doesn't smell like weed. So she loved the fact that she could carry it, and like it didn't smell like weed. It really smells just like oranges. So perhaps that could be an option for people that are still worried about getting found out that they smoke weed. But my advice is don't put yourself in a situation where you're worried about such things. And that's my kind of view. But yes, that's not possible for everyone. But yeah, the stank can really hold on your body too. People, like that one time I went in and the chick's like, you smell good. And I thought she was talking about my deodorant until it clicked like a couple days later. And then I went back and she's like, yeah. She's like, 'cause she thought I was mailing. It was my mail lady. I told the story. She thought I was mailing stuff.
Yep.
I was like, no, I was just smoking it before I came. It was just seeds in that pack. So, but yeah, it is something that, if you're concerned, you should be concerned. And yeah, I don't get paid enough to worry about anything. And I think everyone should take my stance, because worrying will get you sick and mess you up and whatnot. So yeah, but I digress.
I'm with you.
Some people get paid enough not necessarily to worry, but just to I guess have the maybe courtesy to not offend some of the people
And
around
be
them.
concerned, yeah.
And certain people have, I think that the beauty is like you can get people to know you. See, in fucking, I don't want to fucking gloat too much, but if you do a really good job and you just do a great job for
Yes.
years and years and years in and out, and then eventually it
They
comes
find out.
that
Yep.
you're a cannabis user, then that shifts their
Never
fucking
know.
perspective,
Yep.
because they're like, oh fuck, he's not the typical stoner. He's not the
Yep.
typical thing that I had in my head. And I think that it can be interesting, even if you could choose to reveal at a certain point and educate. I just sometimes, like, I'll talk to people that I work with that don't know that I'm interested in cannabis, but I'll approach them with like evidence from a medical perspective, and probably that some of them will assume, because it's like, oh, he suggested CBD because this issue is happening and there's benefit for people that use CBD for that particular issue. But I don't necessarily think that that's like a dead giveaway, like, oh, this guy fucking grows plants at home. So it all just depends on your level of comfort. And I own my own business, so I guess it really doesn't matter that much. I just and I say that I work with kids, but at this point they're all young adults. It's just people with special needs. So I feel like there's a little bit of a level of sensitivity, and people assume, I think, that all cannabis use is impairment, and a lot of cannabis use for people out there is for pain relief, like myself. And you might have to use it morning, noon, and night. And some people look at that as like drinking on the job, but I don't know.
But did they feel like that about other stuff, right? I mean, come on.
All substances, I think, for
Right?
many people, it's like if you're using any, they're fine with nicotine and caffeine because it's legal,
Yeah, exactly.
and alcohol off the clock. But
Or
Yeah,
prescription
line.
drugs. They're cool with the opiates and everything else.
it's that whole legal thing. But it's so funny because in California it is illegal, but people are still catching up to the fact that it's been legal here for a long time medically, but it just became legal recreationally, which almost feels like brings back up the stigma, because just that term recreational, Like it puts into
Mm.
perspective that the use is like, oh, people are just getting high. And then that whole thought that I was just talking about where impairment, people think that and
Oh, that
even
adult
with
use.
yeah,
Yeah.
adult use.
Right.
That is a better
Jack,
term.
I want to stop you for a moment and let you know that you shouldn't feel bad about gloating or anything like that, because people who possess great talent, it's hypocrisy to not or to be modest. I think it's very important for good information to be spread. And I want to augment your stoner tip for a bit. With the cough drop, I absolutely have to agree. I also want to say that if you have a very strong menthol flavor, or like a eucalyptus sort of, or eucalyptol sort of flavored, if you can handle it, those could be kind of strong for some people. That works really well, I think, for clearing up the resin breath that you were talking about. Just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, I use a menthol cough drop every day just as a general. It helps. It's an expectorant. So if you do have like resin or just phlegm, helps you cough it out and get it out. So you have a clear nose and clear throat so you can breathe. If you're an active person like myself, it's very beneficial, but it also covers up the smell. And when you said eucalyptus and menthol, not even just for your breath, on your hands, like if you have essential oils, if you get
Ooh,
resin on
yeah.
your hands from the plants smell a lot like cannabis, right? So if you're working in your garden and then you head off to work, even if you didn't consume, you could smell a lot like cannabis. And I really like this group. They have a soap called Humboldt Hands. It's like a really gritty soap that helps get the resin, like especially for trimming, where your hands get super sticky. It'll almost like chafe your hand if you used it to just like wash your body or whatever. It'd be too much grit, but it's perfect for getting resin or like motor oil or different stuff like tar off of your hands. And so that or essential oils. Like I really like orange oil because it's a pleasant smelling one, and putting a few drops of that on your hands to get cannabis smell off and just to have a pleasant smell that's like not cologne or something that could be overpowering for some people.
You know what works
Lava
pretty
soap,
well
are you
for
hearing
that?
this?
Sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
I was just making a joke that lava soap, if you're hearing this,
Yeah.
if you're listening to our show, you're leaving some money on the table.
Yeah, Lava Soap could come out with a dedicated product for that. No, I got this big, like, I don't know, gallon size pump container of hand sanitizer that's like quote unquote moisturizing hand sanitizer, but it's alcohol based. And man, like a couple squirts of that in your hands, like liquefies everything, and then dry them off on a like paper towel or something, because like the all that dissolved terpenes and cannabinoids and all that needs to go someplace. And if you just try to like rinse it off underwater, it all like gloms up onto your hands again. But it's like, I don't know, I'm pretty impressed, and fairly low dollar sort of solution for this. But yeah, it's just like
I have the same thing, and my only additional suggestion would be get the one that has a little bit of aloe, because
yeah, there you go. This one is like a moisturizing, right? I don't know exactly what's in there to moisturize it, but it doesn't like totally dry out your hands, because that could happen if you were just putting copious amounts of alcohol and letting it dry off of your hands.
that happened to a lot of people during the pandemic, and just generally people that are sort of germophobic, I guess. They use lots of hand sanitizer, and before aloe or moisturizing solutions became common, I actually learned this in a first aid class. People were so worried about the germs, but then what ended up happening is their hands dried out, they got cracked, and then they were getting like cuts and infections and more issues because they were using the sanitizer. So it had a negative benefit, but or not so benefit, I guess. And negative side effect would be a better way of putting that. And but definitely if you have something that has aloe or some other moisturizing agent, I think that could be a great way to get resin off your hands. It also helps with the
and
smell.
at this point, it's more just about getting the resin off my hands. I'm not doing it frequently enough that I need to worry about sort of the drying out aspects that I would if I was using it for like, 5 times a day disinfectant or whatever. But still, I like the sort of moisturizing side of it. And I go big, like I put a lot of that in my hand, like 3-4 squirts, like lather it all up and then dry that out on paper towel. And it's like, I mean, I can have pretty encrusted hands with terpenes and resin, and it all comes off pretty quick.
Hey, I got a question that I can answer from Iceni, is how I'm going to pronounce your name, ICENI. They ask, what is your opinion on systemic acquired resistance and dose? I'm having trouble articulating this wording. And does he try to achieve or something maximum plant health for maximum pest resistance? Is there a way to activate it that you use? And I just wanted to say that a lot of that stuff is very contextual. Plants have to, just like your own body, has to mediate all these different inputs and outputs, and the plant immune response it has to be, just think of it like this. Plants evolved to be stationary for the most part, and they basically can't move away from their threats. So the way that they deal with that is they either outgrow the threat, and that could include overshading and things like that. That includes producing defense compounds and things like that. But it also does require like some regrowth and things like that in most cases. So the way that you would try to use systemically acquired resistance and other biopriming and immune response priming techniques is usually very targeted. There's some fascinating research that shows that, like, if you know powdery mildew is coming, or like a specific pathogen, and you know which immune signals to elicit at the right level, because if you do it the wrong level, that can have other negative effects, then you can get resistances that are far and away superior to many other even products that you would apply in treatment, simply because you prime the right thing against a threat that isn't there yet, but it's ready. And that lasts only for a little period of time, depending on what it is. It could be a couple of hours, maybe even 24 hours, 48 hours. Some effects last and linger. So yeah, that's my response to that. It's very complicated, but I'm very excited to see more information about it.
This is another one, stoner tip, cannabis grower tip, I guess, or even just general user. And it might sound obvious, and you might just do it anyway, because I've done it to myself too many times. Don't touch your eyes after you're dealing with plants, because it fucking burns.
Oh yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
really, really badly. And I've done it to myself way too many times. I'm one of those people, I rub my eyes because I have cats. The cat's hair gets like on my face, and then I'm like wiping the hair out of my face, and then that little bit of resin on your fingers getting into your eye can really burn. So avoid that the best you can. And I guess as a follow-up with that, there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of different opinions on different brands of eye drops, but I definitely would recommend Opcon A. It's by like Bausch and Lomb. They make great eye drops, in my opinion, to get rid of the red eye. If you're one of those people who still, my eyes actually don't really often get red anymore from cannabis use, but if you have that issue, or even if your eyes are just irritated, like I was teaching a swim lesson the other day, and the hot tub that we were doing part of it in was like, they must have fucking put bleach in there or something. Like, it was, the chlorine levels were so high,
Oh
our
geez.
swimsuits faded
Whoa.
within the 1 hour process. So I like looked that up, and like, it has to be a really high level. But because I was
Well, that
teaching,
shit
like,
gonna be good for you.
no, it's not. It's
Can't
really
be
not.
good.
Well, and on top of that, I was doing like, learn to swim and like some life-saving skills. So like part of it is like teaching them to like go retrieve something from the bottom of the pool with like your eyes open without goggles, because sometimes you might get knocked into the pool without. So I'm like demonstrating it, and the very young individual I was working with was like, thankfully not participating in that part. But when I left that lesson, I like driving home, my eyes were just tearing. And I tried, my wife really likes this brand Roto, not to throw them under the bus because they've worked really well for me in the past.
Uh-oh.
But this time when I put them in, it just like made things worse. Like my eyes were like already burning, and I like put them in, and it just like made things like burn way, way worse. So that was a unfortunate experience. And I've seen a lot of people that haven't tried Roto before. When they get given that, they think that like there's like they've been drugged, or like it's like poison. It's so intense, even when you're just like, I don't know, maybe it's the cannabis use coupled with it, but they're very intense eye drop. Like somebody's equated it to like putting a mint in your eye, and
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's your eyes get super
Refreshing.
white, super white with the Rotos, but they burn, in my opinion. So that's if you want a gentler eye drop out there, if you're one of those people that's like, I need Rotos to get my eyes white, I think that the Opcon is a decent solution. They're not like super expensive or anything. I'm definitely not sponsored. You can fucking get them at any drugstore locally for a couple bucks. But yeah, they can
That's
definitely.
another pro tip. What you brought up, Jack, though, it's another tip, like you were saying, for people wanting to get into working in the commercial space wear your fucking glasses even on harvest day when they turn the lights down.
And other PPE.
Because
Agreed.
because just that many buds shaking down on you, you'll literally get trikes in your eyes just from the fucking air. And you'll, believe me, you will want to wear those glasses. So yeah, get you a really good pair of glasses and wear them.
You know, when I was younger, I don't think I remember ever having a sensitivity to like cooking onions. But as I've grown older, I have developed somewhat of a sensitivity to them. And I don't know, like that's another point maybe to make, is that like as you interact with cannabis more and other plants, you can develop sensitization sometimes, or there's other factors that are at play.
I've seen many, many,
Um,
many commercial growers get allergic at a certain point.
Yeah, right. And recently we had that very unfortunate incident.
Yeah, that's, I think still, I'm curious to see if the further investigations, but unfortunate, especially the incredibly low payout to the family, which is sad. But unfortunate, but it happens in every industry. Like when I brought up Amazon a few weeks ago, I know Spartan said that they like killed their employees and or worked them to death essentially. And
There's a lot of injury reports. Yeah.
well, and I'll say this about anything that gets large enough. Like my dad used to host a volleyball tournament, and eventually it got very, very large. And when they were doing it, like he was meeting with people from the city, and they're like, one of the guys said, well, when there's this many people expected, like how many deaths are you expecting? Because when there's just this many people at any event, there's potentially going to be a death. My dad was like kind of naively thinking that it's always just going to be zero, as big as it got. And eventually one year, a ref had a seizure or a stroke in the ref stand at a volleyball event. And they're like up like 8 feet in there and like fell down and passed away. And fucking, it can happen on the job. So sometimes, and on paper, that looks terrible. It's like, oh, your employee died at the job working, and it can be, in many other cases, maybe it was much worse. But yeah, and I think that we should always advocate for worker safety and, you know, workers' rights and things like that. So I'm not trying to say that Amazon or any other company that's done wrong should get away with it, but I do also see that unfortunately sometimes people pass while they're working for just random unfortunate reasons. And when you have giant, I mean, I don't even know how many employees they have, but once you get over 100 or 1,000 or whatever, it can get to that point. So anyway.
Amazon has a really terrible reputation in this department.
This is very true. But yeah,
Yeah.
like it's a good point, Jack. Like at a certain level, certain critical mass, like it's like
To Jack's point here. Sorry, Matthew. But
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and maybe you can help me.
Yeah.
I forget what they call it, the equation where you know, like you get enough people in a room and you can find two people the same birthday.
It's over 23 people. There's a 50% chance.
Yes. So it's like that, but with death. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be glib about such a sad subject.
Well, what
but
I was gonna say is there's one sport that like way more people die playing one sport than any other sport in the United States, and it's golf. And it's just because there's like a lot of old people.
Bunch of
that
old
play
people.
golf.
I knew that you were gonna say,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
a
not
good
because
point.
golf is like an inherently dangerous or like deadly sport, right? Like,
What
but,
Matthew
like,
always
way
says,
more people die playing golf than die like ice climbing and like stuff like that because yeah, so that's kind of to Jack's point.
and Matthew also often says like the best swimmers most often drown, and
Right.
like you can only really drown if you're swimming. So I guess it makes sense. A certain percentage of them eventually are going to drown. But the reason, I guess, that the thing that I do appreciate that they do is they send some of their employees to college and they pay for health insurance and healthcare and things like that, and they can help families out that otherwise might not have that opportunity. It doesn't make them, again, free of any of the other wrongdoing they're doing. But the main thing is, to get it back to the cheap home grow perspective, there's a lot of growers out there in red states who don't have a grow store or are paranoid and won't go to one, but you can get discreet brown Amazon packages shipped to your door with a tent, with a grow light, with pots, with everything that you need. And it gives people, and it's not just Amazon, I guess you can do that with any website, but a lot of people already have it and have access to it. And I think because it's so ubiquitous, it offers a little bit higher level of discreetness. And some people would say, oh, well, they can track you. They've got all your fucking shit. How many incidences of people getting their grows busted based on Amazon are there out there?
All
If
I'm
you found
saying is
one, let me
go
know.
to that manufacturer's website, order it from them, and fuck Amazon. That's all I'm saying.
As long as they're
Okay.
willing to do like a discrete packaging or whatever, a brown box. Like my light company did that. They packaged the box within a box so that it doesn't say grow light when it shows up at your house. And even Amazon sometimes will do that if you don't select the proper packaging thing. But I'm just happy that in 2023 or whenever we started the show or however long it's been possible to do it, you can get literally everything you need other than seeds. And even in certain countries you can buy cannabis seeds on Amazon. You can buy hemp seed here on Amazon in the US, but I think in the UK you can buy like fucking THC seeds, and I don't know if it's the UK or somewhere else, but I saw it on a non-US Amazon thing. So, and it's going to happen eventually, right? They're going to be eventually just shipping ounces to people's store when it goes federally legal, I'd imagine,
Yeah.
because I don't know. But
They got
that's
a lot of
a lot of
catching up to
speculation.
do. The United States Postal Service been shipping ounces forever.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to
and-
them, the world's largest and most punctual mover of packs.
There was a point that was made earlier, and we don't have to make it a really big thing, but I was curious to get people's impressions about this. This would actually probably be a better topic for another session totality, but we talked about like the quote unquote like adult market or the recreational market and how that can kind of bring up a bad stigma. And like another thing that's sort of a complication, and I don't understand it totally, so I am asking for some help here, interpretation, but we like edibles and we like foods that we can put the cannabis material into in some way, shape, or form, THC and other stuff. Medicine, if people want to schedule cannabis to be just specifically medicinal from a legal perspective, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Because you can't go to the Rite Aid and get some ibuprofen gummies. I mean, I guess you could, right? But you have
You
to
can get vitamin
specific-
C gummies. You can get vitamin
Well, that's
D
not really the
gummies.
same
Yeah.
thing, though.
Chewable Tylenol. I mean, a lot of the stuff is like
Yeah, but that's Tylenol.
flavored.
Why can't it be regulated more like food though? Like
That's what I'm trying to say. It wouldn't be
right, like
because
broccoli would be the comparison, right? Like you can put broccoli in a casserole, or you could try to smoke it, or you could do whatever you wanted to it.
I think the best.
But you
fit
can't
would
use
be
because it's
herbal.
scheduled. You can't be using you can't go and put like Vitakin in a brownie. Okay, I mean physically, I don't think it would work.
Yeah,
but
so
you can't.
I'm not. I mean, I think we should deschedule cannabis.
That's my point too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's a point that I think a lot of people don't realize, that the thing that they might be advocating for is actually not what they actually want, because they don't actually know what the implications are. I guess
Well, it
that's
would
the real
immediately
point.
put it in only pharmaceutical hands by most
Wouldn't it?
people's
No,
thoughts
I
and
think
accounts.
no. It could be in the herbal. It could be in the herbal sector. It's a fucking herbal plant. It's been around forever. It's
Homeopathic.
that's
Yo,
the medicinal path you go for. You go through the herbal where they don't have any oversight.
Well,
Dude, you see
Tylenol
the
comes from a
FDA is
tree.
The FDA is trying to close down all holistic offerings and stuff. Did you guys
Right.
catch that? Yeah.
A lot of the
I
stuff
catch
comes from
that.
holistic,
They tried
right?
to
So a lot of
close
the
down
stuff comes from
cannabis, too.
holistics, but then they make it into a pharmaceutical. So like Tylenol comes from some tree bark, right? So there's a tree bark, like a root that you can use, or a tree bark that can make a pain
Willow,
reliever,
I
willow.
think, yeah.
But then also there's the pharmaceutical synthesized version that is ubiquitous and all over the world, and a bunch of people take it. And I guess funny enough, like in the US, we're probably one of the only places where you can buy so much of it at one time. Like a lot of, like in Europe, you can only buy like 10 or 15 like ibuprofen at a time or something, but you can buy
'Cause it
like
kills a
hundreds.
bunch
Oh,
of people every
geez,
year.
really? Wow.
That's another thing that kills. That is so funny to me is aspirin. It kills people, every single year. But you can go buy that on the shelf, and then they fuck with cannabis.
And for a long time, it was recommended that people take, or at least over a certain age or with certain conditions, to take
Yeah.
aspirin all the time. And
For heart
now-
attack risk prevention.
Yeah.
I
Dude,
think they
don't
still
believe
might recommend that in
anything
some places.
Don't believe anything them Western doctors tell you. They're trying to keep you sick. I'm just saying. That's my opinion.
Probably
Be like Tao, eat a cookie a day. and
Probably
you'll
a
stay on
little
forever.
overly
Yeah.
pessimistic. I know some of them personally, and I can guarantee you that they don't personally want to keep people sick. And they're doing
Well, they don't know.
I'll say
They
this.
don't know that they were taught wrong, Doc.
California
Well, don't
doctors
let
are
me get- I'm
pro-cannabis.
sorry.
Everyone
Tao,
I've been to.
how much Tiger Claw do you think will get rid of my cold? About how many elephant bones?
You need
rhinoceros
elderberries
horn.
elderberry, yeah, elderberries and chameleon eye of newt will definitely clear that up for you. But
Other berries. and
yeah,
coneflower.
I think a lot of people would be better off not even going to the doctors, in my opinion.
A lot of doctors
Anything
are
that
now
they want-
embracing cannabis, Tao. That's the thing.
Good,
They're
yeah.
researching
Well-
it. They're using it for pain relief as a less dangerous option, as a easier option that's not as addictive as some of the opiates, and it's not going to cause overdose deaths. So it's something that, like, every
Right.
doctor I've
It's
been to,
getting
not even
better.
the cannabis specific doctors, just regular general doctors. I got in a car accident. I had my back checked out, and I was saying that I didn't want pain relief and that I was using cannabis. And they're like, that's great. We're all for that. And we're not going to like change your treatment plan because we look at it, we just because we can't directly prescribe it
Right.
to you. But they actually do want to know. Like, I think Matthew's mentioned many times in the past, and I think Noah may even take the drug, the warfarin, directly is impacted by CBD. So there
Mhm.
are
A
cross
lot of things are.
considerations.
There was a recent research report that came out, I think, that I just downloaded. I didn't read it yet, but I think they were looking at CBD particularly, and how after a certain amount of dose. Let me see if I can find it. I might be
There's a
able
lot
to
of
find it.
surgeries that they say to not use cannabis before because it impacts the blood and like clotting and things like that. So
Yeah, it's a
Um,
blood thinner that can't THC in itself, and I've
Yeah.
experienced that for sure. I got to stop smoking for like 4 or 5 days before anything like that because I don't know, I'm just too saturated or something. Because I just had not just, but in the past I've had a lump cut out of my head. I had the pore gets closed off, but it keeps creating the oil for your hair follicle, but it's
Oh.
closed off, so you get a lump in your head. So they went and cut it out. Well, I bled like a stuck pig for a long time. It's hard for them to get it out to stop bleeding because I smoked up until like I gave it 1 day, and then I just didn't smoke that day. Well, that's not the move. That's not the move. You gotta give it at least a couple days before surgery.
I will say if you're recovering and you're trying to get clotting to happen, something I learned recently in a kind of like trauma first aid was that I think you have to be above 95 degrees at the point of the injury for the body to create clot. And I know that doesn't seem like super, our bodies are generally much warmer than that, but on your exterior, like if you took a laser and took the temperature of that spot, it's good to stay warm. So like a lot of times they'll give people those little emergency blankets and stuff while they're giving them first aid to keep their body temperature up. So if you're cold, it's going to really also prevent your ability to create clots and heal. So something to consider as far as some on top of, reducing or cutting back on the use. But it is, very real. You've got the personal experience to speak from. And I think a lot of people out there now, if they have to go through surgeries or any other medical things like that, realizing that there are interactions and implications. It's not just like it doesn't affect you. Like it definitely has some effects on our body. I think mostly positive, but sometimes there are side effects that are unintended and could be negative consequences if you're not aware of how to go about, dealing with that. So I'm glad that you got through that. And it sounds like you've at least learned to try and allow that saturation to go down. I think yourself and I, like taking RSO, you get a pretty good dosage that sticks with you for a little while.
Yeah.
So I was surprised, like one of my buddies, he in high school uses a very similar amount to myself, but like when he got drug tested at a rehab facility, like they got sent to because he was like underage or whatever using, they like not only did they test that you have like a positive negative, but like the amount of
Going
particulate
down. Yep.
in your body, so they could see that you like stopped using and kind of track the amount of metabolite. But they're like, you're like 8 times higher than everybody else like that we've ever came across. That's like, it is crazy. Like I think some people, it could just be a natural, like maybe their body stores more metabolite, but also just the amount of use and type of use, like whether
Yeah.
it's concentrate versus just flour or edibles and things like that. It's fascinating
My
how our body
buddy-
takes it in.
My buddy was just smoking flower, mostly mine though, but he got, like you're saying, he had to go into he had an issue and he went in and they were testing him. He had to stop, and he said they were like amazed how long it was in his body. They were like, he must have been using a lot because it was like 2 months they were still detecting it. But if it wasn't for he didn't get in trouble with the law or anything, but I know people have gotten in trouble with the law as well. and had to stop. And they just look, as long as it's going down, they know they're not using it anymore. So even if it's in your bloodstream, they were all right because it was going down, and they knew that, like, yeah, they had stopped using it. So, but that brings up a whole another thing. If you get if they're going to start trying to charge people with driving while intoxicated under cannabis, like, how, I don't see how they could even feasibly do that if it's in your bloodstream.
They need to give you a sobriety test, and even then, those are questionable. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with
as
that.
somebody who's been pulled over with cannabis at 16, and I had to get fucking drug tested after this, I didn't get an OVI or DWI or whatever it was, and I personally felt like it was because he knew that I would have passed a sobriety test. Like, my eyes were white. I was speaking to him clearly. The only thing was that there was smell in the vehicle, and so they went through and found some shit. I didn't. Unfortunately for myself, I didn't give him the right to search for my parents at the time. We're like, fuck you. We're not going to go through fighting this legal battle. You're going to learn your lesson, blah, blah, blah. But I had a reason, I guess, for telling the story. We were talking about something earlier. Oh, yeah. After I got busted, I went and, they had to, as part of it, I had got like a year of probation with random drug testing. And the first part of that was like, I went to like a drug rehab clinic. And at the time, it was like summer, and I just remember I was at open gym for basketball and fucking running in the heat in the middle of the summer and sweating a fucking shit ton. And they didn't drug test me until 2 weeks after I got busted. And at the time, I was like in high school. As a 16-year-old kid, I couldn't smoke as much as I do now. It's just like whatever bags I could score. My brother was pushing or whatever, but definitely don't smoke as much. I was at school, shit, you're 16. But 2 weeks later, I passed my fucking drug test, even though like I was still at that point, I was a daily user up until when I got busted, and I stopped. And like all that exercise, and I think I've heard that it stores itself in your body fat. I think being low body fat percentage, and then also sweating it out, like exercising. I've heard people take like niacin, like they overdose on niacin, and it feels like they get sunburnt, and that's a way to pass. There's also these drinks that you can drink that can help you pass drug tests. But I personally think that like the Monkey Flask, they have like a synthetic urine that shows all the human metabolites or whatever. You can just like wear it around on your body, on your waist or whatever, before the day of the drug test. And you walk in and you just pour it in, unless they're one of them where they're like watching you. And if they are watching you, I guess the advice that I've heard from somebody is not to there's like a fake male part that you can have for the test that you could like pop out of your underwear. But I guess it looks more like a fake part than an actual real human part. So obviously a lot of people get busted using that. So I guess those drinks, the cleanse drinks, I've actually in high school had a couple buddies who used them and worked. A couple of them used like double the amount or whatever. But I've heard that it could even be regional. Like there was a dude, like never get busted. He was a former cop. And then he set up like a fake grow house to show that cops will fucking basically contrive a bunch of things to make raids. And he basically had them raid this house that had like grow lights, but there was no plants in there at all. And he videotaped the whole thing and like showed that like he went through all their documents and fought it, and basically showed that this city in particular was corrupt and how they were going about their raids. But this guy, he also like has a video on like how to pass drug tests, and one of the tips he gave was using those drinks. And that, I guess, like if you're in Ohio or Michigan or whatever, it's gonna be different than if you're in like California or somewhere else. So your local like head shop or wherever, they carry these things. And probably getting on medical advice and getting into the realms where we might, I don't want to get myself in trouble. take this all with a grain of salt. Maybe I've heard in California actually they can't even test you for off the job cannabis use. So
I believe that has recently been the case, although I don't know if there's like loopholes or whatever. I don't know the limits.
Yeah, I think the thing that they would probably do is the on the job to prove if you're using it. I think there's like an oral swab. When I was in college, one of my coworkers got busted, and they did the little like cheek swab, and I think it only lasts like maybe hours or like a day or two, and they admitted to using. But it's interesting all the different types of tests that there are out there. There's like hair follicle and stuff like that, and
never admit to wrongdoing ever.
Always
that's the American
consult an
way.
attorney.
Yes.
I'm right. And what are you going to do about it?
I take when it comes to criminal, don't do this, but I like for like for job stuff, I like to just go in there and taking their piss test and failing on purpose. Be like, what was my score, man? What was my score?
I've actually
I like
used
it.
a couple things which worked for me, and then I recommended it to a friend of mine who was going for to attempt to get, I don't know if it was health insurance or life insurance, but it did not work for them, which was a fuck story, excuse my French. So yeah, perhaps it's individual too if it works for them or not. I don't know, but I can almost guess that perhaps some of these job tests are just for show, and they really don't do the actual work, because like I would think if I'm hiring people and they know that they're using it, well, I guess if I get Spartan, are they going to come in dirty and actually try to get through? And I guess that could be a thing, but I would be like, why am I going to pay, even if it was $50 for a test each person?
Bro.
I'd be, why even bother, you know?
Bro, that's why I'm saying. That's why it's funny. Let me tell
Yeah.
you a little story. I used to be the union steward, and I got voted to vote to negotiate the contracts
Okay.
every fucking year, which was, oh my god.
Oh,
But
boy.
anyhow, and you really get to see what a company's about then.
Yeah.
But I literally had the CEO of the company sit there and tell me, he's like, I had a stack this tall on my desk of applications, and he said, you know, only four of them passed the drug screen. So they're paying for every one of those.
Whoa.
Whoa, I did not expect that.
For this health insurance, it was probably perhaps a blood test. It could have been a different test that was much.
It was a
more,
hair test. It's a hair test.
Yeah, that'll
okay,
do
there
it.
you have
That'll
it.
do
So
it.
yeah,
Yep.
so
At the
but
end of the
yeah, I
day,
guess
private businesses can test you for anything. Like, I'm from Cleveland. Cleveland Clinic doesn't hire cigarette smokers or any nicotine user. They drug test for nicotine. So
What?
interesting.
Yeah, they do at the hospital here too.
Oh my, I've never heard that before. Wow.
Is that not a violation of some constitutional something? I guess not.
So
think it's
meanwhile, some
because-
people are taking up smoking to get the breaks.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a very the United States of America is really just 50 countries put together. And a couple of other territories.
a lot of
Definitely
other
not
territories.
empire or anything though. Yeah, hey.
We
No.
are the ununited states of America.
I did
Well,
find
that's the
that
part-
research report.
The beauty
Oh.
is that we are divided. I mean, that we have each state has its individual rights. Ideally, it doesn't always work out like that, but other
That's
than
right.
like
if you're not happy
cash,
with New York, you could hightail it down to Florida. Party on.
That is
dog.
true. That is true. I did find
with
that
your
research
feet.
report if you're curious to talk about that, although we are getting to the end of the show.
now is actually the time where I would typically pass it to Spartan Grown and say, Spartan's got to get going on over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show in a little bit. So I'll pass it to him to give his final thoughts and shout out for the week.
Nice.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, panel. It was awesome hanging with you guys like every week. And shout out to chat. They, make the show. They always make the show. We don't even have to come in prepared. It doesn't matter. They'll shoot topics at us, or hell, just us hanging out. We shoot topics at ourselves. So I love that. And it's always an informative show. It's not like I don't feel like we get into the weeds too much. I think it's just the right amount of weeds.
Maybe a little extra, but you're into that.
That's right. I'm kind of into that.
You want that high score.
High score, man, especially when it comes to weed. So I don't just everybody will look forward to talking to you next week. And I'm going to be on the Michigan Bros Grow Show here coming up in 15 minutes. Till then, have a great day. Keep growing.
Grow love Spartan.
Grows love, man.
Always great having you.
Peace out, Spartan.
That's Spartan Grown on Instagram. That's really the one place you could find him social media wise. Don't follow for the pretenders on the other social medias, and also spartangrown@gmail.com if you want to email him if you're not on social media. But Matthew, if you wanted to bring up that research report, you should be able to share the screen. I think it'd be a good, nice little, we could just touch on it for the last 15 minutes before we close the show out.
Yeah, I feel like that's a very good idea. So let's do that. Okay, so this was the paper. This is nonlinear disposition and metabolic interactions of cannabidiol or CBD through the CYP3A inhibition or sorry, yeah, through CYP3A inhibition in vivo in rats. And so what they found was that, now I don't actually know what nonlinear disposition is. Do you, Dr. Coco? Can you help us out here?
Not immediately, but give me a
No,
second
yeah.
here.
No problem.
I
Not to put
mean,
you on the
I
spot.
know what both of the words mean, but I don't know exactly what they mean together in this context. But
Me neither. But I imagine that they're talking about a like large uptick in an interaction. So says in the conclusions they say that a nonlinear disposition and a CYP mediated drug and CYP mediated drug interaction. So CYP is this enzyme in our bodies that breaks down or interacts with various compounds, in this case drugs. And of CBD at doses exceeding 10 milligrams per kilogram were demonstrated for the first time in vivo in rats. So I guess this was very important because it hasn't been in vivo in the past. So given the results, they proposed that caution for dose-dependent drug interactions should be considered for CBD. We kind of already knew that. And I think there's a graph that's sort of descriptive of this that I was seeing. Yeah, so we have here time curves over the hours. Is it raining where you are, Jack?
Yeah, is it coming through on the mic, or were you just?
No, I can hear it through my own headphones. And I was curious how far
it's
up
raining
the
here
rain.
too.
Yeah,
We got hit pretty hard last night. Today
we
it
sure
lightened up,
did.
but it seems like it's coming back again. Funny enough, I think the weather system's called a Pineapple Express.
I think it's an what is it called? Atmospheric river. Wasn't it
Atmospheric
called?
river, yeah. But the initial, I think it's like a storm from Hawaii, and that's why it's called the Pineapple Express. But
Oh, I love it. That's perfect. Yeah, I thought this had cooler diagrams. I must be thinking of another paper. Anywho, so yeah, if you were curious to know more, you can check out this research report.
another thing that we talked about earlier, I guess IPM related, Tao even kind of gave an example. You said like the voodoo juice you looked up had a bunch of different bacillus species. So you kind of answered your own question there with that product, at least, that they can be effective together. And maybe it could be that one of them is just dominating, like one is taking over and doing the role, but maybe they do work as an entourage effect together in synergy with one another. I mean, they're all being named bacillus. I think that generally in science means, and Matthew could correct me if I'm wrong on this, that they share some sort of traits.
Yeah, they're all the same.
Yeah,
genus.
usually. Yeah, Dr. Coco's totally right. Yeah,
I think
that's
That's
usually
the first
case.
name in binomial nomenclature. Those Latin names would be the genus and then the species. So, like, we're Homo sapiens, we're the genus Homo, and the species Homo sapiens, and Bacillus thuringiensis. All of the bacillus would belong to the same sort of fairly tight family of different species.
Yeah, the only thing with the microbes, especially bacteria, is that like you get a bunch of different permutations and different strains of the same species, and also
Right,
you can
so
get species
subspecies and then
complexes.
just varieties of the subspecies and all of that. So that's a third name sometimes that they'll use, right? Like Bacillus thuringiensis adewalati or whatever, because it's some specific subspecies that's distinct and recognizable from other subspecies, but it is not so distinct that it rises to the level of a species. But all of those distinctions are still pretty arbitrary, because we're talking about continuous gradations of change, and at various points we'll sort of arbitrarily declare that there's been enough change that this warrants sort of a subspecies designation, or that this warrants a species level designation. But there is some sort of defining characteristics by having sort of groups with more things in common with each other than they have with individuals sort of outside of that group. And we can do kind of cladistics like that to organize things, but it still is always fairly arbitrary in terms of how much difference these names really sort of mean.
It's
Yeah,
funny because
at the microbial molecular level, it like I love how you put that. sort of this gradient occurs. And as you were saying, Jack.
I just think it's a little bit funny. I Googled bacillus meaning and I scrolled down origin Latin, and bacillus means to stick. So
Yeah, like a rod.
yeah, so that's like the commonality, to stick. Oh, it's not like stick like sticky, it's stick like a
I
rod.
think they mean stick like a rod, right? Or am I getting my words mixed up? I might be thinking of it different.
I
don't know,
haven't
they-
found a deeper definition, but I just and the other like more general definition is a rod-shaped bacterium. And then yeah. It also says disease-causing bacterium is like the more modern definition.
There's all kinds of bacillus. I'm not sure where that definition comes from exactly.
Just
but
Google, but that
just
pulled
Google.
from Oxford Languages.
Well, actually, that's one of the reasons why I decided that in my presentation for budworms, we're talking about some of the microbial pesticides. I let it be known that and I'm not gonna. I don't know if this will get us canceled on YouTube, but there's a very closely related species that's important for a particular thing that people sometimes use to make a particular powder that you shouldn't mail to people because it's very poisonous. Anyways,
Dear
yeah,
Lord.
so that there's a bacillus species that produces that, and it's very closely related to Bacillus thuringiensis and all these other bacilli. So
I watched a documentary about that and look into it a little bit more deeply because that was some shit. That whole mail situation.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say. There was some high level lab people obviously implicated, and not something that your typical average Joe on the street is going to get into. I'll say that, unless they've got a very high degree of I don't know if it's chemistry.
Yeah, I would say it's biochemistry, probably. Yeah, probably covers it enough.
And it's
It's,
very
uh,
specific too. Like to that level, they can trace the strain. They knew the lab it came from, who did it, essentially all the way back. It's all traceable. That stuff is it's like a fingerprint. And
That's
only
what's
certain people had
fascinating to
access.
me about that whole thing.
You could get it from your goat skin bongo drums, can't you?
I think you can
Maybe.
get like many things in nature. Like you can get DMT from grass. Like it's just like if you have the chemistry knowledge, you can synthesize basically like fucking anything from anything. Not exactly, but like it's amazing what they say. You're not going to pull blood from a rock or blood from a stone.
Jack
or
is
something.
watching too much Full Metal Alchemist.
Jack's-
I understand,
yeah,
Jack. I understand.
Jack's
No, there's some
gold-
dude.
lead
The
into
shit that they're doing with
gold.
microbes right now, how they're making THC and yeast, like we're actually at like some weird sci-fi levels. If like they can literally just fucking
Yeah,
put
they
shit in a vat and then
GMO'd.
make.
They
Yeah.
GMO'd that yeast.
Or like-
They have the
you know,
ability to do it.
They do,
Wait
yep,
till-
yep.
Wait till we get geez, what are they called in
Star
Star
Trek
Trek? The
Replicator or whatever.
replicators. Man, I have lost
That's
all
like-
of my Star Trek cred now.
We,
But yeah,
there's-
break apart all the atoms and put them together. Once we're at that level, it's like a lot of people are going to be out of a job. Let's put it that way.
It'll be fascinating. I think it'll
hopefully
solve a
there's
resource
different
problem.
way to gain access to that other than having a job at that point. Then I would argue
That's for sure. Yeah. No,
We're just
no
going to
need
be
for credits,
sitting around
right?
waiting for the robots to take care of us or kill us, whatever comes first.
Maybe both.
That's why the Tesla bot is supposed to be like, it's like 5'7" and it can only walk like 5 miles an hour, and it's like easily push overable.
Good.
He doesn't want the thing to like be able to overpower even like a small human. So
I'm on Team Robot. I know the future.
Oh man.
on Team Robot. No,
I did not expect that from you.
no, yeah, especially.
well, Tao's gonna
Tao.
live forever, so I mean he's got to make sure
Yeah,
he's
I gotta
got
make
his
friends.
He's got to
minions
make sure he's
to
got his connections, right? Yeah.
tend to all of his plants when he's got an unlimited plant count and all those acres. It's gonna be a lot of work. He's gonna be flying
upload
drones
to the-
over with a Parabug or whatever, dropping off his
The
IPM.
MJ bug, the MJ robot, just upload your consciousness. Make a couple
I'm
of
not
save
gonna
files
get
Oh
though.
my
the
gosh,
Neuralink.
you
I'll
guys,
be
wait.
the token human in the robot clan.
Have we just wandered entirely over the deep end at this point?
Welcome to
Yeah,
iRobot
yeah.
3.0. We're gonna go ahead and give our final thoughts and shout outs. I'll pass it first this week to Matthew Gates.
My final thought is that, like always, it was a great session, and I'm glad that we got to talk about all these heady topics. particularly the latter half. I thought that we delved in some interesting things about the realities of the legal structure and what is medicinal and how we want to classify all of that stuff. So if you're interested in help with pests, I can help you with that. Check me out at zenthanol.com for professional inquiries. You can also check my YouTube channel, where I'm going to be uploading a bunch of live streams every week from my Instagram account. I do the live stream, I answer questions, I talk about a topic that you vote for on my YouTube channel in the community tab at Zenthanol. And then I will present it and then make an edit, and then I will have a streamlined video out of that edit the next week later. And so I just made the voting topics for my very next session. That'll be session 3, and it will be on Sundays at 1 p.m. PST on my Instagram at SyncAngel. Check it out if you're interested.
Always a pleasure to have you. And just as a reminder for the people, we are looking for cool cannabis related science. It could just be agriculture or horticulture related science, new cutting edge stuff that you've seen that you think might be interesting, like white paper-esque things for us to review. It could even be like a big claim that's being made that you feel like maybe the paper is making claims larger than they should be, justifying things like that. Make sure to DM those to me at Jack Greenstalk on Instagram to have a chance for us to review them and potentially cover them on next week's show. But with that said, I want to pass it next to Dr. MJ Coco.
Hey guys, I'm glad I was back this week, and I will be back again next week. And I am Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. We've started the New Year's Grow Challenge, but I left town on the 3rd, so I haven't even started my New Year's Grow Challenge, but I'm about to drop seeds for that and try to get caught up. So you can still drop seeds and get caught up too if you want to join us. And let's see, check out my YouTube channel and my Instagram. Both are Dr. MJ Coco. I will be having some new YouTube content shortly, and grow or love, everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us. It was great to have you back, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. And I want to thank the American one this week. He showed up very punctually on time, which it's always great to have you for the full 2 hours. I feel like got more than I bargained for. It's always amazing having you. And last and certainly not least of all of the panelists this evening, the American one.
Thanks, Jack. And Matthew and Dr. MJ, always good to hang out and chat it up with you guys. Peace to everyone in chat. Always good seeing all the regulars and some new faces and new names. I'm the American one on YouTube, and the American one _ Keens on the IG if you want to hit me up and ask me questions or talk about anything. And it was a great show tonight, and we'll catch you next week. And I'll probably see a bunch of you in chats around the place over the week. So have a great one, everyone. We'll catch you later.
Always a pleasure having you, the American one. And definitely make sure to check out amyaces.com if you're looking for some of that amyaces. It's on fire. I've grown it myself. I really enjoyed it. It was a solid yielder. It grew pretty vigorously. I have really no complaints at all. Tao is very generous. I don't know if they're as generous over at Daga.garden as Tao was when he sent them to me directly. But I feel like with being regular seeds, it's nice to get a pretty large pack so you can search through a little bit, find yourself some nice females. And I'm very appreciative for Tao for that.
Yeah, they're all 20 beans in each one at least over there at Daga. So just so everyone knows.
That's a much nicer pack to hunt through than a 10 pack. I've in my F3s started to send out like 15 to 20 packs, usually like 20 if it'll fit. I fit as many as I can in a little vial. But
Right.
Yeah, it's great to share.
Regulars. And I also think the way I looked at it is if I wanted to fill up a 4x4, sometimes I would want 9 females in there. So if you want to really go at it and get the whole full tent, you could possibly do that with 20 packs. So yeah, that was my thinking.
And it's always nice if they grow 10 out and just want to keep 10 for later, or grow 5, keep 15 or whatever if they feel like they find something they like. It's really cool to be able to share with the people and see them growing the stuff out. It's amazing sometimes when you send them 20 and they grow all 20 and you're like, oh my God, that's ambitious. So I appreciate all those growers out there that have grown the Velvet Punch and the Amy Aces and many of the other creations of the panelists. I know the next seeds, I'm like Dr. MJ here. I've been delaying my New Year's grow pop. I've been telling myself I was going to do it right when I flipped to flower, but then it would leave me with probably a little bit too large of plants in my veg space. So I'm actually happy I delayed this time, and it lined up with being a little busy in life and putting all my focus in on the main crop. But with that said, I'm at Jack Greenstock. As you can see on the screen here, that's my logo. You'll find me on Instagram there. My backup account on Instagram is Jack_Greenstock. That is also my name on Twitter. So if you'd like to contact me on any of those social medias, feel free to. You can also email me, jackgreenstock47@gmail.com, or message me on my website, 50strains.com. I take messages there as well. And you can also grab a copy of my book, 50 Strains of Green, and check it out. So 50 Strains of Purple is still in the works, working hard to get that finished up, but it's coming slowly but surely, as I always like to say. It's like Activision Blizzard used to say soon with all their stuff that they release, and people used to say soon with like a trademark next to it with their announcements, but hopefully it won't be too much longer. But with that being said, I appreciate everybody, all the listeners. You're amazing. I know we only took a few questions tonight, but really appreciate you guys. And we had a great week last week with you, seeing your gardens and answering questions. So looking forward to seeing you all next week. So Jack Greenstock signing out. Thank you so much to Spartan Grown, who joined us earlier, as well as Kyle Breeder and all the panelists who couldn't join us tonight. They all have great reasons for that, but we look forward to seeing them again in the future. So peace and love, y'all.
Grow love, everyone.
And for Spartan Grown, keep on growing.